In the Absolute universe, Gotham City's true rulers are not heroes. They are billionaires, men like the Joker, a chillingly humorous magnate, and his sadistic lackey Black Mask manipulate the city from luxurious super yachts, engineering chaos to keep the populace under their thumb. Riots, martial law, kidnapping, and experiments at the offshore Arkham facility are all part of their design, reminding the citizens that wealth here is a weapon and humanity is expendable. The Joker's philosophy was laid bare in the Absolute Evil special, the first time he made any meaningful appearance. His scientists discovered that the universe is run on malevolent energy. It is the literal foundational building blocks of the universe, thanks to Darkseid. Therefore, he argues, wickedness and malice is the default state of being. It is natural, it is just, it is right. Amidst his brand of justice stands Bruce Wayne, not a billionaire but a civil engineer. His tools are concrete, steel, and ingenuity, not money. Similarly, his allies in this universe are surprising. Childhood friends Edward Nygma, Harvey Dent, Oswald Cobblepot, Waylon Jones, and Selina Kyle, who are traditionally villains in the mainline universe, are here to aid his crusade. Together, they form Gotham's fragile resistance, fighting not just monstrous individuals, but a system engineered to crush hope. The last issue saw Batman face Arkham's monstrous enforcer, Bane, in a battle that shook the city to its foundations. Through the carnage, Gotham witnessed Batman's defiance, showing them the truth of the situation, and he has ignited hope. Yet, the shadow of the billionaires looms larger than ever. The last issue ended with the Joker blowing up Bane's island home of Santa Prisca, not so much as a punishment, but a way to take away everything he cared about and secure his servitude. And what's more concerning is that he believed he was doing Bane a favour. So while Batman may have won that battle, he still has a long way to go before he can topple the Joker. This issue is pretty much entirely dedicated to the Joker's backstory as told by Agent Alfred Pennyworth. Did I mention that he is a spy in this universe? Who has spent the last 3 years tracking him down. Joker is Joseph Grimm, or Jack as he's more commonly known. The official story is that he is the 5th generation of media moguls and his lineage can be traced back to the 1800s, when his ancestor rose to fame as a popular child performer. He took his act to the stage and was so popular that he was able to buy a theatre outright, and from there his wealth grew. He was in the right place at the right time and was one of the earliest founders of Hollywood, setting up multiple different movie studios. There's little information about him out there and very few pictures, outside of those early films he appeared in, and most records of his activities relate to his charitable work, specifically focusing on children's charity, what with his own rough upbringing as a destitute orphan. And his family continued in the same vein. His son, Jack Grimm II, took his father's money and invested in television, expanding their reach. His son, Jack Grimm III, started a cable network focusing on comedy and children's programming, and his son, Jack Grimm IV, was an early investor in video games, and the present-day Jack Grimm V invested in the internet and computer chips. And Jack Grimm V is just as secretive as his ancestors. Very little is known about him, but Alfred notes that he bought multiple barren islands across the world, which he goes to visit every couple of months. So that's the official story, but Alfred believes that somehow there's only ever been one Jack Grimm. They're all the same person, unnaturally prolonging their own life and passing themselves off as their own son every few decades. In his research, he also found that the official story has a dark underside. Through his company, JK Holdings, the Grimms have funded both charitable endeavours and wars. They own right-wing newspapers and left-wing newspapers. Essentially, Grimm plays both sides, and he doesn't care who wins. All he needs is a conflict for him to monetize. You could argue that this is a sound strategy to hedge your bets regardless of the outcome, but I think that a person who bankrolls both sides of a war, both sides of a political aisle, and both ends of the cultural megaphone isn't a strategist so much as a void in a suit. He isn't guided by belief, ideology, or even malice in the ordinary sense. He doesn't have a cause, he's driven by a conviction that nothing matters except his own position above the fray. This is the soulless behaviour of someone who looks at human suffering the way investors look at, say, weather patterns. Something to exploit, not something to mourn. Owning all the media, left, right, and the noisy grey in between reveals something even more unsettling. So it's not just control, it's contempt. Contempt for truth, contempt for belief, contempt for the idea that people should ever be allowed to make sense of the world without a billionaire's thumb on the scale. Joker is manufacturing division not to push an agenda, but because division itself is profitable. If people can keep shouting, they can't organise. If they're confused, they can't resist. If they're exhausted, they can be sold the next crisis, and they're not looking at him. When someone like that funds every side of every conflict, what they're really doing is betting on entropy. He doesn't need a winner, he only needs a market, and the more fractured the world becomes, the more indispensable he appears. Indifference is exactly the word I would use to describe a man like that, but in this case it's a curated indifference, the kind that can only flourish in the heart that long ago decided empathy was inefficient. We know that Alfred's assessment is correct because we've seen behind the scenes in earlier issues, where Joker literally drains the blood of ethnic babies to presumably maintain his youth. This was not subtle imagery at all about how the world's richest people's wealth often comes at the expense of the world's poorest. Alfred also notes that there is a darker side to Joker's history. As a child, he performed outside of a dentist's clinic, and Alfred found evidence that Grimm had been exposing the audience to nitrous oxide to make them more susceptible to his act. Similarly, the people that appeared with him in early films wound up dying in mysterious circumstances, left with huge Richter's grins on their faces. Alfred suspects Joker wore gloves laced with poison and killed his colleagues with a handshake. Anyone that was closely associated with him wound up dead, including a former colleague of Alfred's. While Alfred tells Batman his story, we're shown what the Joker does on his isolated islands. He takes his enemies, people that annoy him or that got too close to the truth, and he dumps them on the islands for years at a time. And then when the mood takes him, he goes to the island to hunt them down and kill them. We can see that he arms himself with weapons and kills a big cat, but he doesn't use weapons on his enemies. Instead, he turns into that white demonic creature, cackling insanely with joy as he consumes them. It's not clear if Joker's form is the result of witchcraft, a deal with the devil, or just the result of genetic tinkering, like the results of his ARC facilities. And to be honest, I think I prefer it that way. I hope they never actually disclose what happened to Joker. Much like the mainline comic book, Joker's origin has never truly been told. There's always been an alternative take. You know, the whole thing about him preferring to have a multiple choice origin. Regardless, one thing is clear. For as much as Scott Snyder says that this version of the Joker is his most evil creation to date, he's still very recognisably the Joker, even with that physical difference. And this isn't the first time that Scott Snyder has presented the Joker as a mythical demon, dragon type creature, but those earlier examples were either metaphorical, flat out lies, or just temporary. Presumably because DC's editorial team wouldn't allow him to make such drastic changes. But in the Absolute universe, that isn't a concern. At the same time, Jack Grimm is presented as a Bruce Wayne analogue. In the Absolute universe, it's him that has the mansion, the fancy car, the butler, and the secret cave hidden behind a grandfather clock. What goes on in that Joker cave isn't revealed, but we know that it cannot be good. So there was a lot of hype going into this issue, given that the Joker made his first appearance back in issue 1 of Absolute Batman and we've barely seen him since then. And I must admit, I was expecting this issue to have a bit more bite. Pardon the pun. As I alluded to earlier, for as different as this version of the Joker looks, he's still very recognisably the same character. From his childhood murder spree, killing people with his poisoned handshake, remember him doing something similar in The Killing Joke, and then there's his whole part about tormenting people that irritate him for years on end. Dare I mention poor Charles Michael Collins? These are things we've seen before. When Scott Snyder described him as his most evil character, I was expecting something truly abominable. But what we actually got was a void of a man. Someone who doesn't believe in anything except for his own dominance. And that's a very different kind of evil, and it's kind of taken me by surprise. His monstrous, Jokerized form is actually comparatively tame. All he does is chase after people and eat them like an animal. His most wicked form is his civilian identity, an analogue for the mainline Bruce Wayne. He's a handsome, glamorous billionaire with sports cars and mansions, jetting around the world in private planes, but he has a dark, secret life. While his monstrous form devours flesh, his human form devours culture, politics, charity, conflict, anything that can be turned into fuel to keep his empire going. And let's not forget, he can drop a nuke on a peaceful island like Santa Prisca and no one bats an eyelid. That's the punchline of this issue. It's bleak, but honest. So really, it was my expectations that were incorrect and my definition of evil that was misaligned. Evil isn't always a dragon in the dark. Sometimes it's a man in a perfectly pressed suit, signing a check with one hand and lighting a fuse with another. If Batman wants to save Gotham, he doesn't just need to defeat the creature Grimm becomes. He has to dismantle the world that lets Jack Grimm thrive. Absolute Batman 15 is available now from all good comic shops. I would encourage you to research your local comic shop, and if you don't have one, I'm certain there are dozens of good stores nearby that would be happy to mail you your comics. If you're opposed to the idea of cluttering up your home with comic books, then you can get this comic digitally from places like Amazon as well as Neon Ichiban, a new digital comic retailer from the founders of Comixology. Personally, I prefer physical comics, but I do love the convenience of having thousands of comics accessible from my phone, but you do what works best for you. For those wondering about my physical comic collection, here is a small update. With the news that Scarlett Johansson is in talks for a role in The Batman Part 2, potentially playing a former lover of Bruce Wayne's, who returns as a villain later on, my mind went straight to Andrea Beaumont. So I picked up a couple of cheap copies of her first appearance before the speculators pounce on it. It'll be very funny if she ends up being a completely different character, won't it? Next time. I'll be back next week with a video looking at Absolute Flash number 10, where Wally West is lured deeper and deeper into Fort Fox by that mysterious voice calling out to him from the dark. Who could it be? Darkseid? Barry Allen? Maybe Eobard Thawne? Hope to see you then.